Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the No Bad Ideas podcast. This is episode 3. We only have one episode left of the year. Before we get into the guests today, I just want to wish everybody safe travels, as I know Christmas is right around the corner, and we'd love to see you for the next episode if you guys are still watching this channel. I hope you are, though. There's no really unique way to say this, but I don't want to eat itchy bad noodles for the rest of my life, so a little easy thing to do. Before I bore you any longer, though, we're actually going to get right into the next guest here because it is a special one today. He is known around the Calgary and actually Western Canadian local music scene as the greatest supporter of all time. But the reason we have him here is because he actually just released his debut book, Legends of Kalnay, introducing Phillip Redditt, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for having me on the show, Damien.
Thanks for being here, man. I was glad you're here. It's an honor to have you here, especially to get in the mindset of a writer.
Thank you.
It's definitely something very unique. Right away, though, I've been following you for a long time, and you've had a great response to your very first book.
Yeah.
Is it hard to not write a part 2 right away, knowing you've had such a great response to the one, to maybe branching off? Or
Well, it's actually funny you mention that because this book, when it was in its roughest form, it's been around for about 4 years. It just took me this long to get off my ass and get her published. So there actually is a sequel that I've just finished re-edits on. I'm just looking at when to release it. I'm thinking maybe December, but I might wait till next year. Not quite sure yet.
Oh, well, I did assume, even with your debut, you probably have multiple rough copies of so many books. Was there a time where you had, almost 2 finished products, and you're like, which one do I go for? Or was there a time where you're like, I want to put all my effort into this one book?
I like to go one at a time. So, there might be a snippet or an idea that I look at for the book that I'm writing, and I'm like, it's not ready, not for this one just yet. But it's a bit OCD, but I do like going in order. I don't tend to jump around and be like, I'm doing this one. It's like ideas. I usually do sticky notes. So I'll have a whole wall of sticky notes.
Oh, okay.
And just, they're the loose pieces of the puzzle. And then I'll just look over them as I'm going and be like, oh shit, that one's pairing with this one and this is with that. So there's definitely a bit of, to look at it from my desk would be very jumbled, but once I get it all figured out, then it's very streamlined and straightforward. So, or at least I hope it's straightforward. So,
is there a lot of similarities between a lot of your rough copies? Do you try to break out into different genres when you do rough copies, or?
So with the initial concept, I wrote because I wanted to do some horror infusion into the fantasy because I do like horror quite a bit. Stephen King is my number one author, but the idea I'm like I haven't heard of too many fantasy authors drawing horror elements. So I'm like, I need to write a test run basically to see if it will actually gel and merge. So what I did was I wrote up 3 separate legends for the main horror creatures that I was incorporating. So there's Night Stalkers, which are my version of vampires, very 30 Days of Night, very feral, nasty critters.
Yeah.
No Twilight, no sparkling.
Yeah.
Savage, old school rules.
So no, I like that.
But and then I did a legend for the Grim Wolves, which are the werewolves in my story, and a legend for my personal favorite, Wendigos.
Okay.
And I started with that one first because I'm like, Wendigos are typically North American native, North American Indian critters. So it's like putting it in a medieval setting, in a fantasy setting. I'm like, is this going to work? And by the time I got done, it was only a 3 or 4 page story for each. By the time I got done, each of them, I was just like, holy shit, this fits. It really works. So, so then from that point, I built the world character by character, town by town, region by region. And it takes a lot, though. Oh, my God. There was at least, if I'm being modest, there was at least 2 months of just world building before I even wrote down the first page of the introduction. Just build the world, go from there.
Do you want to keep it all in the same universe, where there's little connections between future books? Is that a plan you have?
There's definitely a through line. So I don't know the exact number of books that I'm looking. Originally I thought 7, but I'm like, I may only have enough for 5. There's definitely gonna be at least 5 total, possibly with a book of short stories, but that's very distant in the future. For right now, I'm just focusing on each one as it comes up. but it's definitely a sequential story. And so you got the first one, the Name Diviner, which is book 1 in Legends of Kalnay, and then it's going to go from the end of that one into the next one. So sometimes the character perspectives will change, who you start with, where you finish up, but it's all going the same direction towards a great big finish. So
Is it harder to write further down on the same story when you become maybe emotionally attached to the characters? Like, have you ran into that problem by chance?
yeah,
Or...
I try and write organically. So that is to say that I write down these characters, but they kind of tell me how their story plays out, or they show me how their story plays out. And it's tough because there are characters, even in the first book, that I get to a certain point and I start realizing that their arc is wrapping up. Mm-hmm. And that's not really my choice. It's more like, if I try and change this, it's going to be bad, mm-hmm. in a really horrible writing way. And not just bad that way, but you try and alter things. It'd be like, say, for example, in Game of Thrones, mm-hmm. right? If instead of beheading Ned Stark, if they let him live, then everything that happened from that point on in the books we know would be totally different, mm-hmm. and not necessarily for the better. So it's like sometimes you got to take the hard choice and you got to chop someone, or you got to, make him take a separate journey or become a bad guy and then come back to being a good guy or whatever it is. So it's definitely tough. And then there's characters I've had, still have, that they don't seem to want to die. They should. Mm-hmm. By all accounts, they should be dead like 5 times over, but they're just super lucky, or the gods are on their side, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I didn't see that coming. Like, you just survived this. You just dodged that. Like, wow, how did you do that?
How far into the series have you written up for?
So, in the very rough forms, up to the end of book 4. However,
oh wow,
yeah, it's 4 years time.
Yes,
it took me a while to get around to it, so there's definitely a lot of material that's down. Mm-hmm. I do know for a fact, because I've had people do test reads on even my rough stuff, mm-hmm. that book 3 is just a sad little skeleton that needs bulking up. My mom and my aunt were both like, they're my 1 and 2 opinions. Like, mm-hmm. they read a lot of stuff, a lot of the same stuff I do, and they're both like, "We love you, honey, but this is garbage." So 3 definitely needs some attention, but in that regard, like, coming back to the first 2 after such a long time away, mm-hmm. like, I'm seeing it with fresh new perspective, fresh eyes, mm-hmm. and the ideas are starting to come again. And I've been doing some photo shoots actually with the Hazardous Material Girls here in the city.
Okay.
They're alternative models who do like horror shoots and fantasy shoots, a lot of different things. But there was a character that was just like a vague whisper of like a suggestion. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a name for it when I booked her for the shoot. And as we started talking about who the model was and kind of what they were character-wise, I was like, oh, here's a character that I was looking for. And so she's actually like only in the shoot so far. Like, she's not actually a real character in the book because, mm-hmm. I didn't have the idea at the time.
Yeah.
So it's one of those art influences life and influences other art. So it's quite exciting because it's like, I've got the ideas now. I know where I'm going and what to flesh out better, what to scrap. Mm-hmm. So, but it takes time.
Now that you're starting to become like aware of like, all those things you're saying, is there anything, you've looked back on maybe now that you've had the debut release and maybe been like, or are you super happy with everything?
Pretty happy. I actually had someone that I sold a copy to, and they do proofreading on the side, and they were sending me notes from the printed copy they received. And they're like, there's a major spelling error here. Like, honest to God, there was like one word that had like 3 zeros in it. And I'm just staring at this photo that they sent me, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Because I thought I'd spell checked it, and I had spell checked it. But of course, when you have all these like weird spell words that aren't real words, mm-hmm. then when you do spell check, it's like, there are 1,000 mistakes in this thing. And you're like, yeah, sure. And then the little ones that are actually real slip by, and you're like, oh, dang. So that was a bit of a jarring experience. But they're like, I've counted like maybe 5 errors total. And for a self-publishing, like I'm under Amazon as a brand, they distribute for me, but it's like the editing, the writing, all that stuff, it's me. So it's like, considering this is your first go around, like don't be so hard on yourself. But of course, when you're the artist, you're just like when I got those messages, I was just seething and beating myself up, and I'm like, you screwed up. And it's like, yeah, you can fix it. So go get your spell check, go through it again, and then just do a second print. So that's on the horizon too, to just do a nice polished second print with all the errors corrected.
All five of them.
Yeah, all five of the errors, but then, and also in a larger print. I entered the book in a contest back in the summer.
Okay.
Because Amazon has different contests as the year goes. And regrettably, the size font they ended up giving me was like 2. Kid you not, it was like micro print. The book was only like 120 pages thick, and I'm like, man, this felt like a 300-page book before.
Yeah.
And then the sizing that I had to go with to get in the contest, and then the font, I was just like, oh, this is really, really hard to read. Good thing I have one on my laptop, because I can just go back and read it whatever size I like. But I'm like, oh man, sorry guys. So yeah, so part of the reprint is also to give people the bigger size print, because no one should have to strain with size 2 print. Like, this is a really good story, except I need a monocle to read it.
Yes. So. I'm not too sure if everyone is aware, but in my books, you're a movie guru. Like, anytime I need any new movies on anything, you're the guy I go to. So as someone like you that's seen literally every almost movie possible, has there been, specific movies where you watch and literally think, wow, that writer went like so outside of the box creatively that it maybe inspired you to, maybe go out, maybe outside of the box? Like, was there any of those situations that you were into?
So like there's no 1 or 2 authors or screenwriters or whoever. I do know that, being such a big movie person, visually it was almost like theater, like composing a movie shot, to a degree for some of the fight scenes in particular, or even because I watch so many movies, I actually, like, as I'm writing these characters, some of them I'm picturing with certain actors or actresses in mind. And it's not that, I'm brassy enough to think that it's going to turn into a movie or a miniseries or whatever, but I'm like, if it ever got optioned and I was on casting, I definitely know who I'd pick. Yeah. But it does help as the writer to flesh out your characters better, instead of them just being, some generic looking guess who game avatar or whatever. Like, this person looks like this or walks like this or, has this attitude. So in that regard, movies have been a big influence. A fight sequence takes a really long time to write. Oh my goodness. And it's funny because people, including myself, when I go back for edits, I'll reread a fight scene, whether it's between just 2 characters or like a big group thing, and reading it is like a 5-10 minute venture. The writing, though, I'm like mentally choreographing. I'm like, okay, so they're swinging here and rolling there, and oh shit, that doesn't work. Back it up. So there's a lot that goes into it. But if we're talking like inspirations as far as like authors, Tolkien is definitely one that people will easily spot. I was like, I don't want to carbon copy the greats, because then they'll just be like, you've got no original ideas. But there's definitely influences on my writing from like Tolkien and George R.R. Martin. My benefit too is I haven't read much in the way of like Dungeons and Dragons books, Dragonlance, Salvatore. I'm very unaware of those, which is both a blessing and a curse, because I get some people, I tell them about some of the creatures that I have in there, and they're like, oh, like Salvatore, and I'm like, I guess. I haven't read Salvatore, unfortunately. But it does help keep me from being a carbon copier, where it's like, if I'm unaware of these characters in someone else's world, then technically they are original, just being used, in a different way by me. Which is the beauty of writing generally, is that, if you can think it, you can make it. Even to the point where, like, I didn't want to be so Tolkien that I kept like elves and dwarves, so I eliminated them. I was like, there's going to be a few standing rules for character creation, and 2 of them are there are no dwarves and no elves, because I can't have people then going, oh, you're just copying Tolkien.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Where's the elves? Where's the dwarves? There aren't any, so we're good.
That's good. Yeah. Well, you kind of, when you're going with the choreographic and the fighting scenes, right? You kind of have to do that, because everyone else, when they're reading it, they're doing their whole movie, of that real life. But also that's a question, because it's almost like a saying among the industry where it's, oh, the movie was never good as the book. Now that you've released a book, do you kind of maybe see like what runs into those problems? Like, because as some people who've never, maybe aren't big readers or have never wrote a book, they're always, oh, movies, blah blah blah, right? So it's now that you've seen both sides of things as a movie fan, now as a writer, how do you feel about that?
Well, I definitely know that I've read books that I wouldn't have discovered if I hadn't heard about a movie or a TV show. Game of Thrones is one of them. I watched the first season just after it came out, and I'm like, but there's 4 other books, and like we have 10 episodes, which means I got to wait 42 weeks to find out what happens next. I'm like, balls to that. I'm gonna read ahead.
Yeah,
and that inspired me to read the books. So while there are people can be averse to movie versions or TV adaptations, I'm like, you know what? If it gets people into a book, cool. And maybe they don't, fall in love with it and have like every known copy of whoever's work, but it's like if it inspired them to read it all, that's great. And for my stuff, it's like, obviously there's no cinematic equivalent right now, but at the same time, if it ever does get optioned, which would be crazy, amazing, wow. But if that ever happened, I would hope that people wouldn't just be satisfied with watching the movie or the TV show or whatever, that they'd be curious enough, like I was with Game of Thrones, to go, I don't want to wait for the next season. There's already a few books out. Let's read them and see what happens.
Actually.
So, yeah.
I don't want to really just vaguely ask this. So I actually kind of want to break down into certain processes that you might have took to distribute this book. So I actually just want to even cut down into very first the writing process. So my first question would be, when very first started writing this, have you always planned this is a 5-book series? Like when you very first started writing it?
When I started, I think I had the idea that it was going to be 7 books. And it may still be. Just right now in my head, based on the notes that I put down and where I've gotten to in the story, I'm like, right now I maybe have 5 or 6. And who knows, it might go past 7. Sometimes, like Stephen King, he wrote 7 Dark Tower books. And then after the fact, a few years afterwards, he had one more story to tell with Wind Through the Keyhole, which fits right between books 4 and 5 because it's just a fairy tale fill-in, but it was a really good story. So, sometimes authors don't write things in sequence. Sometimes they have an idea after they're done the main story, and they're like, "But we can add this in." So for me, I'm keeping it as organic as I can. Again, right, to not restrict myself and be like, I have to be done in 5 books, because you might have the problem where you have a decent mid-sized book for a few books, and then all of a sudden a great big Tolstoy-sized tome that's breaking your wrist, and you're like, why did we cram all this into one book? This is like 2 books, man.
2 font size.
So yeah, right. God help us. But yeah, so and I mean, I think the story will tell me when we're done. The same as certain characters, right? When it's their time to bow out, they're like, I know this is gonna suck for you, but I gotta go. Or I'm not leaving anytime soon. You're going to have to put up with me for another couple books. I'm like, all right. All right. Which keeps it, I think that's been for me the single biggest encouragement just for myself. Like that if I'm surprised by the twists and the turns and the developments that the characters are taking, then everybody else can be too. Because if you can predict it and be like, oh, they're gonna be, it's like Clue or something, right? Like, oh, in the study with the candlestick, and it was so and so. If it's predictable, then no one's gonna want to read it, and that would include me. So it's like if I'm going, oh my God, what just happened? Then hopefully everybody else will be doing the same thing. And I've had some people who have bought it this year and have read it, and they're tearing up at the same moments I'm tearing up at, and they're throwing their book across the room at the same moment that I meant that to happen, or it happened anyway. And it's like, that's good. Not that being sad is good, but that it connected with them, right? That the story reached them. Because it's so easy when you're reading, even watching a movie, to just kind of detach and just cruise, where you're just like, oh yeah, whatever. But it's like, if it actually impacts you emotionally, mentally, if it challenges your thinking, that's great.
Well, it's like when someone says, I hate that character. It's like, that's good. Like, you're
Yeah,
feeling that
right?
actual emotion to it,
Yep.
right? You know, they would want you to be like, yeah, he's kind of a dick, right? You know,
Yep.
I want you to hate him.
Or characters you love to hate. There
Yeah,
are definitely characters,
exactly.
even sometimes the good guys, right? They're good guys, but they're such jerks. You're like, how are you still alive? Like,
Yeah.
you should have pissed off somebody and been dead behind a bar like 4 years ago. What the heck? So,
So going into the writing process then, what was the most surprising thing to you about the writing process, maybe?
so surprising would definitely be actually the world building. I when I was younger, I wrote a few rough adventure stories and stuff, like really bad. I've since forgotten them or lost them or did both. But I always felt that I didn't have the capacity to lay out geography or lay out like, here's what the town looks like or whatever. And I don't go all the way into it where you're like reading Hemingway and you're like, 4 pages describing a bowl of fruit. God, move on, Ernest. Let's go.
Yeah.
But just enough that it frames the scene. If it's really important, I'll draw it to the foreground. But I'm like, I don't want to be bogged down with like 40 pages of exposition. I'm like, I want to get to the action. This is what I'm here for. Characters and action and the story moving ahead. Because it's easier. You can go back and fill in if you need to, or people can mentally fill in the blanks that way. If you bog them down with the really tedious stuff, then they're like, this guy's a hack. So, yeah.
Is that something you try to maybe incorporate where you kind of wanted like a little bit more like, you know, what did you think? Like you said, you know, where it's kind of like the mental where they can maybe put it together.
Yeah,
and
and
leave it
think,
open.
I think that's definitely been at the back of my mind, like, because, you know, people sometimes picture characters differently, right? They'll picture a location differently. Sometimes they'll picture it a very specific way. So when as long as the characters are clear and relatable, whether they're fictitious, like, you know, fantasy creatures or humans, if they're relatable, that's great. I do have a degree in theater, so I think a lot of the scene building, really, I focused on dialect and I focused on exchanges and stuff, and then the details, if it was really important. You know, a certain sword or a certain whatever, something in the background that's important. I'll draw your attention to that. But otherwise, I'm like, fill in the blanks. That's part of, and people do it anyway. You know, they'll read a book and they'll fill in those blanks and go, whoa, this is a huge world. And it's really, it's the power of suggestion. You give them just enough to work with and they will fill out that background.
Yeah.
You know, they might have a one-dimensional background where it looks like an old Western. You might have someone who does like a full, like immersive, like there's the cam on the street with you over your corner, over your shoulder. But in that way, it frees the reader to just experience the book the way they need to.
Do you think that might have, like, how do you use having your degree in that, like, to, because it's not like you can go to every single college, there's an author, you know, degree and everything, right? So, like, how does that maybe, you know, like, inspired you? Like, how have you been able to use that experience, you know, into your writing?
I definitely think it's helped me channel the emotional aspect of characters and, like, getting across what they need to get across. I would say too that in scenes like that, moments like that because I do some internal dialogue every now and then, I try to stay away from it whenever I can. But if a character has to express themselves but they can't do it aloud, they got to work through something, I like to have like that little inner dialogue. And I mean, you watch stuff on screen like Breaking Bad, you just have scenes where, you know, Bryan Cranston as Walter White is saying nothing, but the looks on his face or the things he does or doesn't do physically, that tells a story. And it doesn't work so good translating inner dialogue to visuals with no words, but sometimes people do it. And that's the freedom with writing, is that you can do that internalization and be really crystal clear. So if someone ever did see a movie of this or a TV show or whatever, they'd be like, oh shit, this is that part. He's really pissed off right now. So, yeah.
Did you have a time where, you know, you maybe were like, Kate, I feel like, you know, book number one's done, do a read through and maybe had to be like, well, here comes a couple more pages?
There's definitely the slimming down and the beefing up. I did find with both the first and second books in the rough drafts, that the place that I started and the place that I finished were actually the places that I wanted to. And it felt proper. It felt, again, with that organic, right? It felt that this was a good time to cut off and wait and start the next story.
That's perfect.
Without spoiling the second book's ending, it actually ends on a cliffhanger, and I'm hoping to try. So that's part of the debate about whether I release it sooner or wait until I have the third one done, because historically people don't like cliffhangers. You look at Pirates of the Caribbean 2 with that cliffhanger. You look at The Matrix 2 and people are just like, what the shit? So, I mean, it depends. I do know that because I've had that second book for a while, I do want to get it out because it's a fun story. And the characters, the first one's always, it's the introductory one. So it's a lot of world building. There is character development, but sometimes, people are like, but I want to know more about this character or that character. Or you meet new characters that haven't even been there before, and you're like, oh, okay. So
how did you come up with, because I'm assuming since you have so many, rough copies and, there's, especially just in the world of a writer wherein your imaginations are kind of like your limit. So there really is no limit, right? It's all on yourself. How did you, finally narrow down, this is what I want the name to be? Because I'm assuming you probably had 300 names possibly, right? So
actually, if we're talking about like Kalnay itself as the country, it was pretty straightforward. I was like, I don't want something that's ridiculously complicated. I also don't want something that's so hard to pronounce that everyone's going to stay away from it as much as possible, right? You get some names when you're reading even like Tolkien. Love them dearly, but sometimes the words you're just like, what is that? And you try and pronounce it, and then you finally get around to reading like the official interpretation. You're like, oh, I feel like an idiot. So with Kalnay, it was just a matter of like, does it roll off the tongue? Is it something? And it's the same with character names or town names. I'm like, if someone made this an audiobook, would the person reading it, whether it's myself or someone else, would they be like, oh, for God's sake, 79th time reading this name in the last 5 pages. Can we stop with the stupid names? Yeah. So it's more just keep it simple for the sake of brevity, and keep it nice and clean. Like Kalnay does have like an epic sounding ring to it. But it's not a very long name. So it works out nicely. And sometimes, with character names, I'll look and I'll be like, that doesn't really fit so and so, we'll change that. Or but even with that, like I went online to look up very exotic, like European, African names for certain characters. Some of them are just minor characters, but I'm like, even if they're only in the book for like 5 pages, if you're going to mention their name a few times, you want it to sound nice. Or if they're a bad guy, you want it to convey ferocity or intimidation. And it's like if your main Wendigo, his name is George or some goofy thing, you're like, I'm supposed to take this guy seriously? No. Yeah. But if you have a more ferocious sounding name, then you're like, yep, he's this guy, all right. So,
well, it's nice to kind of have like, you just like, okay, well, I want to make it, technical but simple enough where the reader won't get lost. So when you're writing, then do you always write in a way from like, do you write first like your perspective and then reread it, maybe thinking it from like the audience perspective or like them? Like
I think for myself, because like when I was in theater, I did do like acting and stuff, but I found that the time I had the best time was if I was directing or behind the scenes. So you're kind of looking at that big picture. Now I can, as a writer or as a director, I can zero in right on a particular character or moment. But then my impulse is to look at the whole spectrum. Even when I'm watching a movie, even if it's a brand new movie, like let's take Joker, for example. I watched that one recently. I'm looking at Joaquin Phoenix, but I'm also doing like a macro pullback and being like, how is this whole world of Gotham with the garbage strike and all the nonsense going on, how is that affecting him? How is that affecting this guy or gal? And so I think when I'm writing, there's definitely, I can zoom in on somebody, but if I have to, like with the battles, I tend to, even if it's a big group thing, I do like focus in on a small group. So they're in the middle of this fracas. And you get that sense, but it's also very specific because if you have a big generic scene, and not much in the way of specificity, then people will get lost. But if you follow, like with Lord of the Rings, right, when you're watching the battle at Helm's Deep, or even reading it, okay, we got the big scope with the line of elves and the orcs charging, but then we're going to focus in on Aragorn.
Yeah.
Or then we're going to focus in on Gimli or Legolas. And then you're like, holy shit, like this is really crazy. They're fighting hundreds of thousands of orcs and they're just a handful of mainstay characters. Whoa. Yeah. Are they going to make it, right?
No, exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a very complicated but beautiful writing process you have there.
It definitely is.
So let's talk about the publishing then. What was the most surprising thing, especially, doing that all on your own, right? What was the most complicated, maybe surprising thing there?
Honestly, the most surprising thing was how simple it was.
Really?
I had this in my head after I finished. Like, I'd finish each book in its rough draft, and then I'd re-edit it. And then I'd get to that point, and I'd be like, and now what do I do? Like, I'm not rolling in green already. Like, I can't just go out and throw down money at Scribner or wherever that does mass market production. It's like, I have no bankroll. And then my aunt's a nurse down in the States, and she did I want to say it was a thesis for like her master's or something, and she wrote this thesis and it turned into a small book about peer relations between nurses.
Okay.
And she got it published through Amazon.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of mentally bookmarked it. I mean, I haven't read the book because it's very technical and I'm not even qualified to pick up a scalpel. So it didn't really sit with me. But then, I thought about it after I came back to re-editing Name Diviner. And I just thought, I'm going to message her. I'm going to message my Aunt Kim. So I messaged her and I'm like, so how simple or how difficult was getting your book published? And she's like, oh, super simple. Because with Amazon, they have a service under their umbrella called Kindle Direct Publishing, which is what I went with, KDP. And KDP, it'll take you about, if you're really taking your time and being meticulous in your scrutinization, it'll take you about 3 hours to comfortably read everything they have to say about their process, royalties, things like that. But my biggest concern, I think, was just like copyright infringement or theft, which is dumb. It's like, nobody knows who you are. They're not going to steal something from an unknown. I don't know. But that was always kind of one of my latent fears. And looking at their process, looking at how they pay out, looking at the options available, I was like, man, like this is big company backing with small size self-publishing kind of forefront. So it's like you're in creative control of your stuff. And then, because all they do, like they'll only print books on demand. So like when I placed my order for 50 this summer, that's all they printed. If someone else orders something from somewhere else, then that's that.
Yeah.
But they don't have like a stack of them sitting, on a crate somewhere going, all right, time to, it's like when someone asks for it, we'll have it. And the same to even have just an e-reader version. I was like, well, and they format it, people buy it, and then it pops up on whatever device they have. I'm like, well, that was simple. So, and then it was just looking at it after I got my my first batch of books in the mail. I was like, what was holding me back? And I realized it was like self-doubt and just this fear of like the unknown. In this case, not knowing if people would want to read it or even know it was out. But the funny thing with that was that, and this wasn't even a deliberate thing. Like I've been part of the metal scene for about the last 5 years, and at no point going to shows or festivals or whatever, going to small concerts, was I ever like, man, I'm doing a really good job at networking and making friends. And it didn't even factor. And so then when I made the announcement and I set up my Facebook page for the thing, and all my metal friends are liking it, and when can I get a copy? Where can I get a copy? And I'm just like, whoa, what? Because, it was still, I'd been supporting, and then when I needed support, people were like, yeah, I'm going to buy it. Of course I'm going to buy it. Why wouldn't I? And I'm like, I don't know. And it's funny because in the metal community, we don't really talk about books. Even when we're at festivals and stuff, usually we're talking about movies or music, a lot of music. And reading is a harder one to broach in conversation with people, because it's not like Netflix where you just go, oh yeah, go watch El Camino.
Yeah.
Right? A 2-hour investment and you're caught up. With a book, there are things you've read that other people haven't. You might luck out and find a friend or two that are really into the same thing you are, and you can have these really deep conversations about your favorite author or whatever. But it's a little bit different with reading. So I just made a stupid generic assumption that nobody reads. And boy, was I proven wrong, man. And that was hugely encouraging to have people not only be interested, like it wasn't just, for the sake of buying it, I'll buy it. Like there are people who are like, I want to read this and I want to read it now. The handful of people that I know for a fact who have finished it are like, so when's that sequel coming? And I'm like, I'll let you know.
Yeah. No, that super awesome. Especially like you said, just being such a great support of the scene, right? It's great they can show that support right back. I do agree with you because like you said, one of the things holding back was, the self-doubt, right? And I was going to ask, what was the most surprising thing, but in a way, it wasn't super surprising how great the response was, just because, I knew it was going to be like everyone just, but
I was definitely floored by the support, like people not just liking the page. Like I had, when I first did my rough draft, and I hadn't even thought about publishing, I'd made up a Facebook page and it had maybe 24 followers, and it was mostly work friends at the time and some close family members. That was it, because at that point I hadn't met everybody that I know now in the scene. Hadn't made those friends and those connections. And so when I came back to it this time, I was looking at the page and I'm like, I haven't been on here in like 3 years. This just feels like almost haunted, right? Like this is jinxed. This page is jinxed. So I deleted it, started a new one. And right now, as it sits, I'm at just over 200 followers.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm like, all right. And it's not that every time like things start going down, I'm just going to recreate the page. But it was like the difference between following through this time versus just kind of lollygagging and stagnating back then. I'm like, all right, so this page is going forward. But it's hard work. Like if I want people to check the page out, like the page, I got to give them things to read, whether that's news about photo shoots or upcoming release dates or whatever. New batches of books coming out. It's like I have to take that initiative. It's not just going to come to me. You have to work for it. Even once it's published, I'm like, if I want more copies getting sold, I got to sell them to a degree. Like people can get it, but I do want to do, for 2020, I want to go to certain festivals and events as a vendor selling my book, or books if there's more than one by then. Knock on wood. So it's been a real interesting time that way, with discovering more about myself and realizing that people do care. People are interested, and again, right, old artists are their own worst critics. And you get in your own headspace and just run around there going, nobody likes it, nobody cares. It's like, really, have you actually gone out there and tried to get some attention for it? Have you made those connections? Have you put it out there? Well, no. Then shut up and do it. Like,
well, and even because I did see recently you also did a photo shoot with Dana Zook there not too long, right? And that's also from the metal community and everything. And how's that?
It was a blast. I tell you, I'm not usually a person who likes either taking my photo or having a photo taken. I don't usually do selfies unless I'm like, oh, I've had the same profile pic for a year. Okay, we'll do one, but that'll be it. And it's usually like, oh, awful hair or something. And with her, with the whole shoot, first of all, we were in Edmonton, and she was like, we can do this in Calgary because you live there, or you can come up here. And I'm like, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't know the first place to shoot. I mean, I live in Calgary, but I don't go on photo shoots on a regular basis. I don't know where the hot spots are, where we can't go, whatever. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to come to Edmonton. We're going to go to Edmonton here, where you are. You know this place. You know the right places to shoot. I gave her an idea of the shots I was looking for, and then we just went for a walk downtown, and we found the right spots did the right shots, and she gave me final call over like what we actually published, but she picked like her favorite dozen or so, and then we did them in black and white and color, and in both forms. They're really nice. I'm a bit more partial to the black and white thing, kind of old school that way, but the color shots that we got of those same things, I was like, man, like there was a couple I could like count the threads in my suit jacket. I was like, holy shit, that's really detailed. And yeah, it was great because I'd announced the book, right, and then set up my page, and I had a short list of people I was going to contact for like promotional photos, character shoots, and the only person I thought of for the author shoot was Dana. And I was going to message her like the day after, because I was really busy the day I made everything for the pages and stuff. So I was going to wait a day or two, and then in the time I was waiting, she messaged me on Facebook, and she's like, so do you need an author and a shoot?
That's
you
awesome.
looking for someone to do some shots? And I'm like, you know, that's really good that you contacted me, because I wasn't sure if you'd want to. Like, I'm not a metal artist, so I'm like, do you do regular people shots? I don't know. You're always doing shots of Dave Grohl or Jack Black or Goat Horror. I'm like, man, I don't know if I even qualify for this. But she was so down for it, and we just had a really good afternoon. Like, we're just walking around the downtown core, and of course, I don't know Edmonton at all, so it was like, wow, just an absolutely amazing experience. It's definitely inspired me to want to go back just to visit. And with so many people that I know now in Edmonton with bands and stuff, I'm like, I have places to crash if I need to. I have people I can go see. It's not just, you know, tourism time. It's like, if I want to hang out, we can do that. So it's pretty awesome.
Dana's an amazing photographer. Like, I honestly one of the best. But it goes, not half and half. Sorry, but you know, you have to have a good, you know, portrait there as well for you to get shot right.
Yeah.
I definitely want to have Dana on 2020. Actually, I think she'd be amazing to have on there, especially with just how well, you know, like both of you, just big metal supporters.
Totally.
How did you really get into that metal scene? Because you are known as the gods of music, local supporter. Like, really, man. You had a birthday bash with bands just for like you on there.
That was a great time.
How did this happen?
So the whole thing started with a movie, actually, as most things in my life are want to. So 2015, Mad Max Fury Road comes out, and I'm a huge Mad Max fan, and I wasn't quite sure about Tom Hardy or anything, but I'm like, well, I'll give it a shot. And it was, and still remains, like the best movie of 2015 for me. Now, I'm big into dystopian stuff, bleak future. The soundtrack was great. Everything about that movie just ruled. I haven't not rewatched it recently and been like, oh, this is garbage. What did I like this for? Now, that same year, in 2015, Unleash the Archers released their Tonight We Ride video. Or at the very least, it had been out, and I hadn't been aware of it. But my roommate at the time, Sean, he was aware of how much I was digging Mad Max and like the dystopian stuff. So he sent me the link to that, and I watched it. And it was like the full unedited radio not the radio version. So it had like all the fills, all the riffs, all the stretch notes.
Yeah.
And just from the jump, like just the visuals and her first note, I was like, holy shit, I love these guys.
Yeah.
And then, so where the metal part comes in then is, I hadn't been aware of Loud as Hell. Like I knew about it in peripheral because I worked night shifts at 7-Eleven for a while. So every summer for like the last 3 years before, there'd be metalheads on August Long that I never saw before, and I wouldn't see again until the next year.
Yeah.
So I was like, shit, there's a festival. I got to go to this thing. And so as it happens, that particular year, who was headlining but Unleash the Archers for Loud as Hell 5. And by the time I discovered this was like June or July. So we're
real
like,
close.
We're coming up to the event, and I'm like, all right, it's $100, but you know what? I would pay $100 just to see Unleash the Archers. Like, I knew none of the other bands, didn't know anybody who was in them, didn't know what they sounded like. I did watch some videos leading up to it, so I kind of got an idea. But it was basically just jumping in with no knowledge. And I lived in the boonies for a lot of my younger life, so anytime I find something new, music or movies, I like latch on. If I really like it, I'm just like that rabid fan who's just like, give me all your stuff. And and it was the same with Unleash the Archers. And so with Loud as Hell, I'm living in town, and I'm like, well, I have a car, and I just live down the hill by the the extra food's there in an apartment building. I'll just drive up for the music and drive back down. No drinking. I'll just come. Yeah, right. That didn't happen. I was in luck. I knew exactly one person there that year, and she let me crash in her tent with her, and kind of guided me through the bands a bit. Like, so this band is playing this genre, and they're really good. It's like, okay. But the funniest part was I'm milling around in the center there and just talking to fellow metalheads. At the time, I don't know them at all from Adam. And then I see them up on stage later, and I'm like, oh shit, you're in a band. It didn't, and it broke the wall down for one thing of like just that idea of pedestals. Like, you know, we kind of sometimes can put people on those little pedestals and be like, oh my God, you're amazing, and just idolize them rather than just realize they're regular people.
Exactly.
And for me, it started off the other way around, where like the only band that I knew was Unleash the Archers, so they were on the pedestal, but everybody else was just ground level, boots on the ground. Not a bad way, just. And so I was like, oh man, you're in this band, you're in that band, or sometimes, holy shit, you're in two bands.
Yeah.
What is going on? And that when I came back for Loudest Hell 6, because that was just not even a question at that point. It's like, I'm coming back. This is the best thing I've ever been to in my life.
Yeah.
So welcoming. I mean, even your dad, like I didn't know him very well at the time. I was aware he had the tattoo shop, and that he liked metal, but I didn't fully understand the scope at the time. And so to just be more and more involved, and part of it was people being like, hey, you should go to this show. A lot of it, though, was just me going, I need to get out there more. I need to see more shows. I need to be more involved. And then we fast forward 5 years, and here I am. And but it's been good because like there's always new bands to see, new people to meet, and seeing people that you haven't seen in a while, especially if they're like out of town bands. You're just like, oh my God, it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
And that's a real blessing, I think, that we have such a down to earth metal scene that, with a handful of exceptions, and I can't think of any off the top, with a handful of exceptions, people are generally very, salt of the earth people. They're not pedestaling themselves and be like, I'm the greatest thing since sliced motherfucking bread. Like, no.
Yeah.
They're just, and again, I'll be at the front, I'll be moshing out, headbanging, whatever. And sometimes the band members will notice, and they'll find me afterwards and be like, dude, you were rocking pretty hard there. And I'm like, hey, you're giving me energy. I got to give it back to you.
Exactly.
And it drives me nuts when people don't do it. I mean, within limits. I mean, if you have a physical ailment and you can't actually physically mosh because you have like a fused vertebra or something, okay, valid reason.
Yeah.
When you get people who like, they'll be at the front and they're not there to have any fun, and you're like, get to the back.
No,
come on. Like, if you're going to be up here where they can see you, like, you have to give them that energy. You have to headbang. You have to do something. Yeah. And then, so the birthday show. So it was a weird, probably midlife crisis thing. I don't know. I'm in my 30s, midlife crisis. But I was at a show that started this year down at Blind Beggar. I don't remember all the bands were playing, but Lacuna was playing. And there's a couple people who worked there, like Darian Dick. They recognized from Loud as Hell. I'm like, oh, you work here? Like, a lot of these guys and gals work in these places. And just the Blind Beggar was a really welcoming first-time experience on a smaller scale venue. And I was like, man, like, I need to come back here more often. This is great. $10 tickets and amazing food, awesome bands. I'm like, why wouldn't I? And then by the end of that show, I was already thinking about down the road. I'm like, man, I need to do something different for my birthday. I always do the same thing, which is usually go out and see a movie or stay home. And I'm like, I want to do something a little different. So I talked to Darian because I knew she was part of the promotion team there. I was like, so if I wanted to put together a show for, like for my birthday, could we do that? Is that possible? She's like, yeah, it's possible. Like, and ended up, it was funny because it ended up being 2 weeks earlier than my birthday. It was the only day that worked. But ironically, if I'd been born when I was supposed to be, and I've been a rebellious little thing who decided to stay 2 more weeks, I would have been born the day that we had the thing. So I'm like, technically, it is my birthday. I just didn't come out until 2 weeks later. And then the ironic part there was a show at Vern's with Tides of Quran. And I think Lost Nebula was the headliner from Mexico. And it was on my birthday day. And I'm like, well, that just worked out real fine, didn't it? So I got 2 shows one that was planned for my birthday and one that was unplanned but fell on my actual birthday, and I was like, golden, love it. So yeah.
And you had Black Friday headline your birthday show, right?
Yes.
Shout out them, man.
Oh,
They're
I love
so
Black Friday.
fucking good,
You know, it's
man.
funny. Black Friday, they were allowed to sell 5, and it was amazing. Like, I don't think I'd ever seen a 3-piece band that just gives her the way those guys give her. Brad with his patented leg kick jump thing. I'm like, I've tried to copy it unsuccessfully, and I'm like, man, you probably have to be Brad's weight to do this properly, because he like flies like 5 feet, like Johnny Cage on Mortal Kombat. You're just like, what? You were there and now you're there. What the hell?
He's got such good screams as well.
And then the clean vocals, like you listen to.
Screams are so good.
Oh, it's great. And just all of them, like the energy that they give off. And it kind of made me sad because that birthday show actually, by the time we got to the headliner slot, a lot of people had cleared out because they had to work the next day or whatever.
Oh.
So there's like a dozen people. And I'm like, what do you mean you left? This is the best part, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, the nice thing was I didn't have to fight for the mosh floor.
Yeah, very
just
true.
like, all right, well, I got plenty of elbow space and leg space for when hug button comes on. So,
not to like maybe assume anything, but I remember you saying, there's a lot of, like maybe self-doubt before you wanted to release the book. Was maybe, being part of, something bigger like the metal scene, did that maybe, increase confidence by chance? Like, just being out there more? Like,
I think it did. Like, I know personality wise, I'm what people would call an omnivert. So I can be introverted and by myself and happy with that, or I can be in a big crowd, like at a festival or concert, and be totally at home making new friends and catching up with old friends.
Yeah.
And I can't explain exactly how, but I definitely do know that it had an impact on like getting it out there. Actually, if we want to boil it right down to who got me out there was Taylor McNally.
Oh,
yeah,
the MC.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
The lovely big hair. And
shout out.
she had posted something on Facebook, just a status about like, seize your opportunities today. Like she does them pretty regularly, but earlier in the year, I want to say early spring, she posted one, and I was just in a bit of a funk, and so I sarcastically kind of commented, I'm like, yeah, that's easy to say, not so easy to do. And she basically, I mean, she wasn't verbally abusive or anything enough to, report the post or whatever. But I was just, she sent me a comment that was like, the only thing holding you up is yourself. Whatever you think is holding you up, it's bullshit. And I mean, she's not one to mince words. So I was like, wow, that was right to the point, wasn't it? And then I keep looking at this comment, and eventually I'm off Facebook, but I'm still thinking about it. And I'm like, I mean, not that she's a shrink, but man, like, she's not wrong. Like, I'm holding myself up. Why am I doing that? And that was what, kind of kicked off the whole thing of like looking for a publisher, talking to my aunt, reading through all of Amazon stuff on how to do the direct publishing, and then finally getting to the printed format. And it was just like, holy smokes, like, this is real. And so like whenever I talk to friends, whether they're in bands or they're models or photographers or whatever, if they're having a moment of doubt or a moment that they're down, I'm like, it's not as bad as you think. Like your work is good. It's really good. I might dare say great for some people, depending on who they are. And it's like, and that was when I was like, okay, so going forward with the writing. So when I first started writing, I was working at Walmart, and bottom line, as most people who work at Walmart, I hated it. And when I started writing initially, it was a get-rich-quick scheme. I was like, I'm ready to get famous and make money and get the hell out of Walmart. Which, I mean, I had to get out of Walmart. But then the book just sat and sat and sat. And I knew at the time, I was like, it's a bad reason to write. I mean, the story was right for the time. It was ready to come out. But I'm like, the motive behind it was horrible. So after Taylor's, mental cuff upside the head, get your shit together kind of thing. I was like, okay, so if I'm doing this again, for real this time, I'm like, I need a goal. I need a specific focus and an angle to not just promote myself, but promote other people. So I came up with, excuse me, with a couple hashtags that if you've looked at my posts for Kalnay, you'll see quite regularly, and that's promote literature, promote art. Because I'm like, you know what? And that was what got behind the whole get the shoot with Dana, do shoots with the hazardous girls, get character profiles and stuff out there. It's just like, no, it's not just going to be about me. It'll be cross-promotional. It'll be, hey, this person took these photos. They're amazing. You should check them out. This person took these photos with these models portraying these characters. You should check out their stuff and my stuff. And it's like, I'm not keeping a tally of like, so I've got this many people and they've got this many. It's just like, no, like, please check these people out. And to tell you the truth, like, it's felt a lot better this time around with the writing and the publishing and doing these cross-promotional things with people. I'm like, this isn't just about me anymore. And that makes the writing more wholesome for me personally, because it's not a money thing. It's like, I do get royalties. They're not anything I can, build a giant beach house on, but there's something. And it does say that people are reading it and generating interest. And I'm like, nobody gets famous overnight.
Yeah.
And that's not the goal anymore. It's like, if it happens, wonderful. I will not complain. But I'm not setting out to have, the stilt house on the beach. It's like, if it happens, it happens. But in the meantime, let's just enjoy getting these characters out there, having people read. Because again, like, I don't know a lot of people who talk about books. So I'm like, maybe I'll discover that people I know or people that they know read, and that this is what gets them into reading. And I've had a few people who, when they bought it off me, they're like, I don't read very often, but I'm making a point to actually sit down and read your book. And I'm like, and that's part of what we're doing this for. Yes, great.
Exactly. Give them just maybe a brand new hobby or something in general, right?
Gateway drug, people. Reading, literacy. And it won't ruin your life.
So then I know, you probably have to keep like a lot of stuff hush hush, right? But what is maybe the next time frame to release part 2? Do you have a name for part 2, or
so
anything you can share here though? Obviously,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. It's no secret. I've been posting about it on Instagram and stuff, and some of the character shots and whatever. So the second book is called The Crossroad of Kings, and it actually has to do with a geographical location on my map, which sadly I don't have a map. So if there are any map artists out there who are really good at doing this stuff, I do need someone to transcribe my grade 3 drawings to an actual decent map. Tolkien level, if we can, nice hanging on the wall poster style. But
ripple, please, so I could feel.
Well, because I mean, with a map, it's like, man, with such an epic journey, like, you need to know that it was a long trip. You read Tolkien, you read Lord of the Rings, and you're like, geez, the Shire's way up here. And they're like way over in the southwest for Mordor. Like, that's a big ass trip on foot, man. So same with my stuff. It's like, I'm sure people can fill in the blanks pretty good, but it's like to actually look at a page and be like, what leg of the journey are we on now? Oh my God, they're in orc territory, sorry, I lost track. Time frame.
Yes,
yes.
sir.
So I'm hoping, because like I said, I've done the re-edits on book 2. I'm debating whether to release closer to mid-December this year, or if I should wait till next year. I'm kind of feeling like I should publish it before 2020, but at the same time, like, I don't want to rush. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I do know that I've been sitting on this second book for just about as long as the first book. And so, like, to people who are reading the book, they're like, it's only been a handful of months. What are you, Rick Riordan? And me, I'm like, no, man, I've been sitting on this for like 4 years. And the last time I sat on this long, I didn't do anything with it. So I'm like, part of me is like, you've had that time to sit on it. Now's the time to just get it out. So it'll just depend. But we will see how things unfold.
How does the inspiration work? Like, is there just moments like when you're driving home and you're just like, I figured it out? Or, how do you get into, sitting down, like, because I'm assuming it's not as easy as, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write the next 3 chapters, right? I'm assuming it's probably...
Yeah. It's definitely not that easy. I mean, sometimes it is, but more often than not, you'll write, a paragraph, you'll write a page, and you'll be like, oh, where are we going now? I don't know. Or you'll backtrack. But again, like, I find that when I'm actually doing the writing, to have... And this is for anybody who's like, looking to start this themselves, have your own designated space, free of distractions. And I mean, for some people, distractions include music. For me, I've found that's actually rather inspirational. Plug in some Manowar, plug in some Tides of Quran, and just rock out while I'm making a scene. But it all depends on yourself. The other thing, though, would definitely be like, have notes. Don't be afraid of sticky notes. It's like, as long as they're not like covered in real glue on the back, you're fine. But pop them up and have a look at them and see what happens. Because I had one character relationship, just more of like knowing each other, not like anything romantic, just fraternizing. I was like, I'm looking at this one card and looking at another card, and they're two rather old characters. They don't look old. They're both wizards.
Yeah.
But I was like looking at the one card and I'm looking at the other card and I'm like, holy shit, these two know each other. I don't know when. I don't know how long it's been since they saw each other, but these guys have been around long enough. They would actually have probably met each other. Write that down. So in that way, it's like again, I keep using the word organic, but the writing just, if I have to force it, I'm like, people are going to see through the bullshit. I'm going to get to a point when I'm editing and I'm like, nope, that just... And the thing is, too, there are certain moments when you're editing, because like writing, don't spend too much time on your first draft trying to re-edit as you go. Get it down, get it out. Sometimes you have to change your name, sometimes you have to change location, but it's like, just get it down. Because the problem becomes, you micromanage yourself at the start, it gets worse. If you write freely and then come back to it and scrutinize, that makes it a lot easier. But in actually choosing where to go, there's certain points, kind of like Doctor Who, fixed moments in time. There are spots in the story where if you go a certain way, if you decide to change it later and undo it, you have to undo all the other stuff after, and it just becomes like a great big unraveling sweater that your sister made horribly.
Yes.
So it's like, you have to make a key decision at that point. If it's something that's a minor change, you're like, I can change that in a moment's notice, no worries. But if it's like a major turning point for a character, or a major death, a major revelation, it's like, you got to be certain this is how you want to go. Because changing it later gets to be a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, especially when because you almost have that feeling like, oh, I'm so close, and you're like, wait a minute.
Oh shit, what did I do? So
well, seriously, Aaron, I couldn't appreciate, giving everyone the inside mind of a writer here. I wish I could say I could relate to it, but it's a little more complicated.
Again though, like, whatever you do, I mean, you're in a way, you're doing an art form right here. I don't know if I could do a podcast on a regular basis. I can barely do a selfie at times. That's just your nose, guy. No. But that, and I've even had folks from bands, right? They're playing instruments, they're singing, they're making all these like miniature worlds with their songs, and they're going, man, you're doing such a great job. I feel like an idiot. And I'm like, I can't even hit like the foot thumper on a Rock Band 2 in time with what I'm seeing on the screen. So. And it might sound a bit cliche, but I think there's a saying from Einstein, right? If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll always be stupid, because that's not what a fish is supposed to do.
Exactly.
So the same way, I mean, there are people out there who, they're artists, they make music, they do photography, they write books, but some people just are good at one thing. And it's like, whatever your thing is, or multiple things, don't look at someone else. Don't look at my stuff. Don't look at a different musician's work and then go, man, I'm dog shit. It's like, no. If you're actively working towards improving yourself. Like, I know musicians, right? A lot of musicians these days, and I see people who have actually upped their game. Whether they're flying away on the fret bar on their guitar, or getting those ridiculous like double time thumper kicks like a monster. I'm like, holy shit, that took work. You worked hard for that. So don't be like, oh, it's nothing much. Like, no, whatever you're good at, be good at it, and take that compliment, right? Take that praise, because you worked for it. To go, and I mean, there's a degree of modesty too. Like, you're thanking me for writing, and I'm like, I'm glad that it's made enough impact you wanted to have me on the show.
Oh yes.
But I'm not going to be like ballooned head in the clouds like, I've been on a podcast, so now I should be on Letterman. Like, no.
You're like,
no,
fucking right, so you thank me for
it. But it's like, no, like, take everything one step at a time. You don't get anywhere by trying to do all the things at once. You don't get anywhere by trying to measure yourself up to someone else. I mean, I love Stephen King. Am I going to be Stephen King someday? Probably not. And that's okay. Because if I was Stephen King, then for one, no one would buy my books. They're like, man, I read this in Cary. I read this in Salem's Lot. You just copying this man. It's like, no, write your story, write your song, do those photos, whatever you got to do, and make it your own. Be your own person, be your own artist, because you in turn inspire other people. Mm-hmm. Like it's not even like a concept right now, but I do, and I have had some musicians ask me, they're like, so are you going to do like a concept album for some of this at some point? I'm like, that's like 2-3 years down the road, but I already have a short list of like bands I want to call and themes I want to go with. So I'm like, don't go away because I'll probably have you on. But it's like, art creates art. So it's like sometimes you make the art and sometimes other people make the art. But as long as something is being created and shared and encouraging people, because really that's the main goal that I want to go with is just, if my reading or if my writing has encouraged you to do the same, mm-hmm. even if it's completely different, mm-hmm. Then go with it. Mm-hmm. And if I end up being, mentioned in someone's like thank yous at some point, I'll be like, wow, I didn't know I could inspire someone in the erotic novel section to write something. But hey, whatever floats your boat, right? So, yeah.
Honestly, that was actually very perfect and very inspiring, the very end of that. And I actually kind of just want to maybe end it at there, actually. So before we go, we'll give you the red carpet. We have that camera. Oh, actually, we only got one camera. I'm sorry. But yeah, link in description. That's where you're going to be able to find the book for the Amazon. It's link in description. We're also going to link his Facebook page and Instagram page in the description. We're also going to link really everything else. His photo shoot, the person who did his photo shoot, also hazardous material models who did their real life characterization. Anything else you'd like to add, or
just if you've been reading, do stick around. Some people, they start writing a series and they kind of fall off. I've had this on my mind for the last 4 years, and the last few or couple books, however many it ends up being, have always been question marks. But revisiting, finding inspiration through other artists, whether it's photography or musicians, whatever. Has definitely brought it back to the foreground. So there is more coming. If you finish the first book and you can't wait for the second book, feel free to reread the first book. I got no problem with that.
New episode every Sunday. Like I said, we only have one episode left of the year, and it is a very special one. Not any more special than all our other ones, though, because all our guests are extremely special. So stay tuned. Like I said, though, we only have a Twitter handle. So if you really want to stay up to date on everything and help me from... Thanks for being here. Cheers.
Cheers, man.